Okay, so this is basically the presentation outline for today's sharing session. So we begin with the introduction, which mainly the demographic characteristic in regard to trauma cases trend in Malaysia, and then initial assessment and management that we practice here, and then future direction in regards to the management as well as the summary. So for the introduction, so basically, trauma is a global disease that occurs constantly within all communities, which causes significant morbidity and mortality. So as you can see, Rosita 2022 reported that approximately 5 to 6 million trauma-related deaths occur every year. And motor vehicle accident are the leading cause of trauma-related death globally. And a further of 20 to 50 million people suffer from non-fatal injuries with associated disability. And approximately 93% of the road fatalities on the road occur in low to middle income countries, which is including us, Malaysia and Indonesia also considered as middle income countries. So this is basically the overview of the injury trend in Malaysia. Okay, so mortality trend in Malaysia. So basically, as you can see in this figure, transport accident is considered as fifth leading cause of death in Malaysia in 2022. And for the principal cause of death by age group, transport accident accounted for 2.6% and mostly occur for those less than 14 years old. And if we look back at 2020, approximately 20% of death occur due to transport accident for the age group less than 40 years. Okay, now we go to the road injury trend. From 2010 until 2019, the blue color one actually the age group 31 until 60-year-old, and the green color one is less than 30-year-old. From this graph, we can see that more than 90% of road traffic death involve economically productive age group of less than 60 years old. Okay, and more than half actually, as you can see here, of total road traffic death involve younger working class less than 30 years old. So it's quite common, road traffic accident and death occur in Malaysia is quite common. That's why it become the fifth leading cause of death. Okay, when we talk about the trauma death, okay, we cannot run away from the trimodal death distribution. So basically, there are three peaks of the death distribution, which occur immediately, and the highest peak, this is the highest peak, which is occur immediately. Example like brainstem injury, height spinal cord injury, and laceration to heart or great vessel. This kind of injury is how to say inevitable, meaning cannot be managed. It succumb to that immediately after the injury. So the only way on how to prevent it through the preventive measure, for example like law enforcement, and then public awareness, and many more. Okay, and then the second peak of death, example like hemorrhagic shock, life-threatening injury. This one can be prevented. This kind of death can be prevented through immediate trauma management. And the last one, which occurred days to weeks, example of cases like multi-organ failure, sepsis, and as well as nosocomial infection. For this one, it's more like complication due to the first insult, the first injury due to trauma itself. Okay, so in conjunction to that, in correlation to that, we developed the Malaysia Trauma Change of Survival. Okay, the aim of this change is actually to delineate the vital flow and core process that the trauma victim will undergo from the point of injury to recovery. So from here, we can see there is 5 components in the change of survival. We start with the early activation and pre-hospital trauma care. Okay, and then proceed with the trauma life support and resuscitation, and then acute surgical intervention care, intensive and definitive care, as well as recovery and rehabilitation. The aim is more like to increase the survivability of the trauma victim as well as the outcome. Okay, so for the management of the trauma cases, we divided to two, which is the pre-hospital phases, which is the pre-hospital phase and in-hospital phase. Because you can see from this Malaysia Trauma Chain Survival, we actually emphasize on the early activation and pre-hospital trauma care because if possible, we want to prevent this one, the second one, and the third one. Okay, we want to attend as soon as possible to treat the cases here. So we increase the survivability of the victim or the patient. All right, so the component of the what the pre-hospital team do during this phase are airway management and cervical immobilization, breathing and ventilation, circulation and resuscitation, as well as external hemorrhage control, immobilizations of the patient, early administration of the tranexamic acid. This one is very important because we want to control the bleeding. One of the causes of mortality just now, as you can see, the hemorrhage cases. So we want to control by giving tranexamic acid. And the principle must be given within 3 hours, otherwise it will be not effective. And then avoidance of overzealous fluid resuscitation, because we want to prevent any hemodilution which can worsen the bleeding. And then the last one, communication with the receiving hospital and immediate transport to the closest appropriate facility. All right, in the hospital phase, this is basically the component. Okay, the component that we do during the in hospital phase. It begin with the 0-point survey, trauma reception, and then I've got the components of primary survey, adjunct to primary survey, secondary survey, and tertiary survey, and then disposition or discharge of the patient to the ward, to the ICU, or maybe discharge from the hospital itself. And the last one is the team debriefing. Okay, in the phase of 0-point survey, the first phase here, the 0-point survey. From here, the pre-hospital team that attend the case, they need to notify the hospital. They need to notify the hospital about the case, so that hospital can aware about what happened and can prepare accordingly in order to receive the patient. Okay, so according to the cases, okay, that is the criteria that we need to follow in order to activate the trauma team. The trauma team consists of ED personnel that is specialized in trauma care, trauma management. For example, like emergency physician that specialized in trauma, and then and those paramedic as well as nurses who are capable in managing trauma cases. Okay, and then after that, the team briefing and ED preparation. After the trauma team activated, then the team leader of the trauma team will do the briefing and the ED preparation in order to receive the patient. So in case a patient we know gunshot victim to the chest, for example. So the team know what to prepare. For example, prepare the chest tube, the intubation set, the resuscitation set, the save all blood, okay, and also the the brainula. Okay, they prepare earlier so that when the patient arrives, we can directly attend the patient without any delay. And at the same time, the trauma team leader also need to do the role allocation, because without role allocation, we don't the team member don't know what is their role. So we specify. Okay, for example, one person will in charge the airway, another person will in charge the circulation part, and then another team member will become the scriber, also the the runner. So if everyone know their own role, so it become more systematic and there's no delay in giving the treatment. And the last one, the preparation, the whole preparation to receive the patient. And then at the trauma reception, this is the component that the pre-hospital team need to relay the information that need to be relayed to the trauma team. So we follow the mnemonic the mnemonic of ADMIS. Okay, A stand for age, T stand for time, M for mechanism of injury or medical illness, I for injury suspected or known, S for sign and symptom, 3 for treatment given, and its subsequent effect. All right. Okay, after the patient on the bed at the trauma bay, so the subsequent action is the trauma team will conduct the primary survey. So this is basically the component of the primary survey, the initial treatment and management for patient who having trauma. Okay, so basically how to remember, we follow the mnemonic CABCDE. So C stand for control of catastrophic bleeding. So if there any bleeding that may lead to life-threatening, okay, so we have to control that bleeding first. Okay, once the bleeding controlled, then we proceed to A. A stand for airway maintenance and cervical spine protection. For airway maintenance, we have to check, we have to open the airway using the jaw thrust technique, specifically for trauma cases. And then we open after we open the airway, we check, is there any obstruction in the airway? If got too many secretion, we do the suction. And then if got a blockage, we have to find either partially blockage or fully blockage. And if we can see the foreign body, we can sweep out. If cannot see, then we let it be. Okay, because we're afraid we might push it further inside the patient trachea. And then at the same time here, we also check for the gag reflex. If patient have no gag reflex, unable to protect the airway, then we have to apply the oropharyngeal airway. Okay, and then after that, depending either the patient able to breathe or not, if patient unable to breathe, we have to give the definitive airway. For example, we assist the doctor in performing the intubation to the patient. All right, and then for the breathing, that one is for the airway, and at the same time, we also make sure that we protect the cervical spine. Okay, because we don't want worsen patient condition. Okay, so for the cervical spine protection, we apply the cervical collar. Okay, there is the criteria, we call it as nexus criteria, in order to apply the cervical collar. Okay, we use the mnemonic of NSAIDs. We use so many mnemonic in order to help us to remember. Okay, the indications of the cervical collar application. The first one is neurological deficit. If patient having neurological deficit, it's indicated to apply the cervical collar. And then spinal tenderness, if the patient complain tenderness at the spinal area, and then above clavicle or above shoulder injury, intoxication, as well as distracting injury. All that are the indication to apply the cervical collar. And then the next one is breathing and ventilation. For breathing and ventilation, okay, so similar like before, the one that I said about intubation, if patient cannot breathe by their own, so probably we help or we assist doctor in applying the ETT tube, endotracheal tube. And then what again, we check, we also check the SpO2, and we perform the IPPA. IPPA stand for
sorry, Miss
inspection.
Puan.
Yes.
Sorry, Puan Samatu, 10 minutes left. Thank you.
Oh, 10 minutes left. All right. Okay. So I will not describe in detail about the ABCD. Basically, this is the component of the primary survey. The main aim for primary survey is actually to detect the life-threatening event. We want to detect the life-threatening event and manage it. Okay. So this is basically the concept. Since we have 10 minutes left, so I will just go through very fast. Okay, this is adjunct to the primary survey. The things that we need to do in order to get more information as to help us to detect the life-threatening event. Okay, just to share with you about the life-threatening event. Okay, there is sick, the airway obstruction. Okay, and then T for the tension pneumothorax. Okay, and then we have the massive hemothorax, we have the tracheobronchial injury, and also cardiac tamponade, as well as open wound, open pneumothorax. Okay, there are components that we want to detect in primary survey. So this is basically the adjunct, the investigation that we do in order to help us in detecting this atom TC or the diseases that I mentioned earlier, the condition that I mentioned earlier. Okay, after primary completed and patient stabilized, then only we can proceed with the second one, which is secondary and tertiary survey. Okay, for the secondary survey, we focus on history taking. History taking, we don't do the complete history taking from the detailed one. It just we use the ample technique, which is we asking about the allergy, medication, past medical and surgical history, last meal, event related to injury. And then we do the head to toe examination. And the purpose of this secondary survey is actually to identify the hidden injury. Okay, example like pulmonary contusion, and then aortic disruption, okay, and then myocardial contusion, diaphragmatic injury, esophageal injury, as well as the flail chest. Okay, and once we complete the secondary survey, then only we can proceed with the tertiary survey. We can never go to third survey if we didn't finish the secondary survey. Okay, so there is basically the basic principle. After we finish one survey, then only we can proceed to another phase. We cannot just skip it. For example, patient come to the hospital, we straight away do the third survey. We cannot do that. We have to go one by one. And then the third one is actually the complete and systematic examination for safety and completeness. This one is more comprehensive examination, including the documentation, the history taking. If the patient conscious after we provide the initial management, and then got new complaint, we can entertain to that complaint. Okay, and then this also the preparation before we discharge the patient to the ICU, to the intensive unit, to the ward. Okay, so we actually planning about the transfer, what drugs to be continue, okay, what tube that patient on, and then what else, the medication that patient on, we just continue whatever the treatment that we given earlier, and then in case if what new complaint, we entertain accordingly. All right, so this is basically the future direction. Because Malaysia aim to free from any road traffic. Okay, in our Malaysia road traffic plan 2022 until 2023, this is basically our strategic plan, and we as a medical personnel, this is our focus, post accident management, because for number 1 until number 9, nothing much we can do except number 10. So we just want to emphasize about medical multi-specialty approach. This one we actually already practice, but we want to strengthen this approach. Okay, and then the human capital development and clinical approach. Okay, so specialists, for example, this is a multi-pronged trauma training approach. So basically, specialists we will sign for subspecialty training, specialists and medical officers, special interest and clinical attachment for paramedic as well as nurses, staff nurses. We actually have our own plan. I mean, our Malaysia have their own plan. For example, we developed the program. We call it Advanced Diploma Emergency Care. The one that I'm teaching. All right. So in this course, actually we have subspecialty called trauma, subspecialty trauma. So those who train in the subspecialty trauma considered as expertise after they finish, after they graduated their study. And some more, we also supply them with trauma life support training. Right, this is basically our student, they practice with the trauma physician, our trauma physician in Malaysia. Okay, this one is trauma life support, the continuous education that we conducted, okay, from time to time, because we want to update the knowledge and also the skill of the paramedic, the doctors, as well as the nurses. All right, a part of it, we also conducted the online education. This one is free, a weekly online education, providing the new update, latest update about the trauma management. Okay, and then this one, actually, as I presented earlier, we already implement pre-hospital notification and trauma team activation. But here, we want to strengthen, okay, because when talking about the trauma center, we only have so far one trauma center in Malaysia, but we would like to, how to say, develop more trauma center, so that more comprehensive, more effective
Samatu,
treatment
sorry.
can be given to the patient.
Samatu, sorry, 3 minutes left.
Okay, 3 minutes left.
Thank you.
Okay, jadi this is just sharing the picture related to the trauma notification apps. Okay, so this is basically the trauma team activation criteria that I mentioned earlier. There is the criteria in order to activate the trauma team. So this is the criteria that the pre-hospital team have to follow. Okay, and then this is the flow. Okay, this is our damage control room. Damage control is resuscitation suite, which those trauma patient will be treated here. Okay, very comprehensive and sophisticated area. Okay, and then this is our current Malaysia Trauma Registry. Here we can get the statistic information in regards to mortality, morbidity, and then treatment given to the patient. Okay, last but not least, very systematic approach is very important. Systematic approach is very important in order to produce best outcome to the trauma patient. Okay, so also as I mentioned earlier, we're talking about the chain of survival. So it's very important to follow to follow the chain of the survival, so that we can make sure high quality of care can be given to the trauma patient. Okay, so this is all my references. That's all from me.
Okay, thank you very much for Ms. Norsmatul Aida Binto for giving such an informative and comprehensive presentation for this part. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have a video from ILTC. Please, the operator can share the video for us. Mr. Fajri. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, after we watching the video from ILTC and the company profile from Pasar Nursing Academy Jakarta, we will next to the speaker. Yeah, just wait for.
Gedung sendiri dengan fasilitas outdoor seperti pos satpam, dan area parkir yang luas. Setiap fase yang kamu jalani harus bisa mendatangkan pelajaran untuk naik ke fase berikutnya. Mari wujudkan mimpimu bersama kami dengan bergabung bersama keluarga besar Akademi Keperawatan Pasar Rebo. Sarana dan prasarana lain yang ada di kampus kami seperti resepsionis, kemudian ruang layanan administrasi, ruang dosen, ruang tamu, lobi, dan di lantai 2 kita memiliki banyak laboratorium. Laboratorium Keperawatan Dasar, Laboratorium Keperawatan Maternitas, Laboratorium Keperawatan Medikal Bedah, Unit Kesehatan Kampus, Laboratorium Keperawatan Kegawat Daruratan, Laboratorium Keperawatan Jiwa, Laboratorium Keperawatan Laboratorium Keperawatan Gerontik, kantin, perpus, ruang musik, ruang kelas untuk tingkat 1, tingkat 2, dan tingkat 3, serta rooftop.
Apa yang bikin kamu daftar di akte pasar? Yang bikin saya daftar sini, soalnya akses dari rumah saya menuju Akpar Pasar Rebo juga dosennya tuh terbuka sama pertanyaan mahasiswa-mahasiswa ini. Biayanya terjangkau.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Kenalkan, saya Arni Sunarti. Saya alumni Akademi Keperawatan Pasar Rebo angkatan ke-7. Saat ini saya bekerja di rumah sakit swasta, di salah satu rumah sakit Akademi Keperawatan Pasar Rebo. Itu luar biasa. Salah satunya yang selalu saya ingat adalah terkait dengan attitude. Jadi kalau menjadi perawat profesional, nomor one bagi saya adalah attitude. Jadi tunggu apa lagi? Yuk bergabung bersama Akademi Keperawatan Pasar Rebo. Ditunggu ya.
Saya Abdul Gofur, alumni Akpar Pasar Rebo tahun 2012 lulusnya. Bahasa Indonesia. Akpar Pasar Rebo bagi rumah kedua setelah rumah saya, dan rumah yang bisa menjadikan dan menciptakan serta melahirkan perawat-perawat yang luar biasa, perawat-perawat yang berintegritas, perawat-perawat yang punya karakter.
Hai, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Perkenalkan, saya Sevi Widianingsih. Saya alumni Akpar Pasar Rebo tahun 2016 dan saat ini saya berpendapat. Satu ingat apa? Seluruh dosen selalu pasienmu seperti kamu memperlakukan keluargamu sendiri.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, shall we continue? I'm sorry because of the signal for today. We are going to listen the second part of this presentation to Miss Yuanita Panma to present the material of emergency in urology renal colic pain for about 25 minutes. Miss Yuanita, please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Oke, sudah terlihat?
Sudah, Ibu.
Suara saya jelas?
Ibu. Yap. Yap.
Oke. Baik. Oke. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Nice to meet all of you. Hope all of you in a good health and happiness. First of all, thanks for the opportunity given to me from the Asian lecture community to attend the international sharing lecture today with Masa University and Berkala Widya Husada Nursing Academy. This time, we will discuss about emergency in the urology, specifically about renal colic. I will divide our discussion today into the 5 sections. First, about the disease and the incidence, and then second, about etiology and sign symptom, diagnostic finding, and then medical management and nursing process. Renal colic is an acute pain in the kidney that is caused by stones or infection in the urinary tract. Renal colic is a severe form of sudden flank pain that typically originates over the costal vertebral angle and extend anteriorly and inferiorly towards the groin or testicle. Acute renal colic is generally caused by acute obstruction of urinary tract by a calculus. About 12% of men and 6% of women experience renal colic in their life. Over 1.2 million emergency department visits a year in the United States are due to acute renal colic, with about 20% of patients requiring hospital admission. And over the last 30 years, the global incidence of the kidney stone disease has steadily increased, and it continues to do so. This is the stone belt. Is distributed throughout the world and is characterized by a urinary tract stone prevalence of 10 to 15%. In this zone, climatic and social condition favor stone formation. Some stones are associated with the poverty, others with influence. In Europe and America, there has been a sharp increase, almost exclusively related to the affinity for calcium oxalate and uric acid stone. Stones can develop in any part of the urinary tract. It can be in the kidney, or in the ureter, or in the bladder, or in the urethra. This stone form when some kind of minerals like calcium and uric acid stick together and create the hard crystal. The symptoms of renal colic is vary depending on the size of the stone and the location in the urinary tract. There are various types of kidney stones depending on the composition or amount of substances that trigger and inhibit substances in the urine. The most common type of kidney stone is this one, calcium oxalate, followed by calcium phosphate, and then uric acid stone, and then sulfite. So sulfite often associated with the urinary tract infection, or in Indonesia, we say that infeksi saluran kemih or ISK. Okay, and then cystine stones that result from the genetic disease and other type of stone. This is a Stockhorn calculus, the stone in the renal pelvis that fill more than 1 or 2 calyces. In Indonesia, we call it batu tanduk rusa, Stockhorn calculi. Okay. This is the other stone. Okay. Renal colic is caused by the dilatation of the renal pelvis and urethral segments, while colic usually results from an acute obstruction, such as a urethral calculus, and then it may also be due to various other problems and disorders, such as urethral spasm, immediately after double gystain removal or ureteroscopy. Okay, and then most stones, over 70%, occur in people aged 20 to 50. They are more common in men than women by a factor of about 2 to 1. Patients with obesity, hypertension, a positive family history, or nephrolithiasis, irritable bowel syndrome, and diabetes are at increased risk for kidney stone formation. Hispanic and Blacks have the lowest overall risk of kidney stones compared to the whites, who have the highest. Okay. And then the renal colic is just one of the symptoms of the urinary stones, and there are the other symptoms that can occur alongside the renal colic. The symptoms include the dysuria, or painful when urinating, and then hematuria. There is a blood in the urine that may make the urine appear like a red, pink, or brown. And then urgency, feeling constant urgent to urinate, and then nausea and vomiting, and then smelly urine, and sometimes the patient got a fever higher than 38.4 Celsius. And also there is anuria or complete inability to urinate. For the diagnostic finding, in the urine sample, we can find the hematuria, leukocytes, and then crystal and bacteria. In the serum blood test, we can check the CBC, and then blood urea nitrogen, and then creatinine, serum electrolyte levels, and parathyroid hormone. In plain radiography, we have the kidney, ureter, and bladder, and then CT scan, ultrasound. For the note that when a kidney stone is suspected, contrast medium is avoided. And we must analyze the past stone because we can avoid the recurrence of the renal stones when we can analyze the stone, what the composition of the stone. Okay. For medical management, there is a surgical intervention such as nephrolithotomy if the stone is in the kidney, and then pyelolithotomy if stone is in the kidney pelvis, and then ureterolithotomy if stone is in the ureter, and then cystostomy if stone is in the bladder. The other intervention beside the surgical, there is ESWL, or extracorporeal shock wave lithotripsy, and then ureteroscopy, and then PCNL, percutaneous nephrolithotomy. I have some video. Okay, here. Yeah. This is kidney, ureter, and bladder. Okay, this is kidney stone. Yeah. The ESWL is used to treat this simple type of kidney stone. Okay, and then the patient will lie on the exam table on the procedure will take about an hour. And then the ESWL use shock wave that come from outside of the body. This one shock wave come from the outside of the body to break stone into small pieces. Okay, and then the small stone fragments will pass with your urine for a few days following your procedure.
Miss Yuanita, you have 10 left.
You have 10 left.
Okay. Okay. Mm. The next is about wait. Now. Okay, this is ureteroscopy.
Miss Yuanita, are you still there? Miss Yuanita? Maybe the connection is not optimal in here. Miss Yuanita? Okay, please. Miss Yonita, I'm sorry, the
Okay,
mic.
sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay. After do the ESWL, we can do the inversion therapy. The patient will drink 2 cups of water. This will increase urine production to help flush out stone fragments, or patient can drink coffee to flush fluid from through the kidney. The second, patient will lay upside down on the bed for 20 minutes. Place 1 or 2 pillows under your head for comfort. And the last, the patient can drink another 2 cups of water to flush the fragment down. When the patient lay upside down, the patient may have someone tap on the kidney to jostle the fragment. This is the picture. This is the picture. Okay, lay upside down for 20 minutes. So drink two cups of water and then lay upside down 20 minutes, and then drink 2 cups of water. Do this inversion therapy 2 times a day until the fragment was disappear. And then for medical management, nutrition and diet for calcium stone, the patient advised to restrict calcium in their diet. And for the cystic stone, the patient must low protein diet. And then for uric acid stone, the patient must have a low purine diet to reduce the excretion of uric acid in the urine. And then for the oxalate stones, the patient must increasing food intake, and the intake of oxalate is limited. The other medical management is administer the antibiotic for if the underlying causes is urinary tract infection or ESK. And then to relieve the pain, we can have an SAID like morphine just for the severe pain. Okay, and then we can treat the nausea and vomiting with ondansetron and metoclopramide. And this is the other about promote kidney stone passage. We can do it with the alpha blockers such as tamsulosin with an analgesic like ibuprofen. Okay. As a primary survey, we we do the ABCD, airway, breathing, circulation, and disability. We must make sure that the airway is clean, no bronchi, breathstone, or wheezing, or the others can be heard. There are no body injuries in the chest area. And for breathing, we can check that is there increased respiratory frequency or respiratory distress or tachypnea or retraction or using respiratory muscle. For circulation, we must check is there a decrease of cardiac output, restlessness, lethargy, or tachycardia. And for disability, we make sure that the awareness of the patient that compos mentis. And then for the secondary survey and third survey, we must assess the patient general symptom and then patient risk factor, and also review patient medication because there is some medication could affect the renal stone or kidney stone. And then we can ask the patient about the urinary experience. There is a pain when when the patient is urinate, or there is a bloat or hematuria in patient or not. And then about the next about urinary output, it's less from the normal or not. And monitor pain frequently because we know that renal colic is very, very severe pain, and it's it must we as a nurse must help the patient to relieve the pain. Okay, and the last we do the physical assessment. In the physical assessment, we do the abdominal assessment. In the renal colic, the patient will move around because they will they feel that they are not comfortable with the position because of the stones. The stones can be grated with the urinary flow. Okay. And then observe the patient for a sign of infection, such as fever or chill, or maybe if there is shock, if there is urosepsis. And then strictly monitor fluid balance about intake and the output, and also monitor physical cues of pain intensity. For nursing diagnosis, first is acute pain, and then deficient knowledge, and then nutrition deficit, impaired urinary elimination, ineffective tissue perfusion. Okay, for the acute pain related to kidney stone, spasm, inflammation of the kidney, urinary system obstruction, we can do the intervention like promote pain relief, use patient reliever, treat the underlying causes, and allow passage the stone. Okay, Miss Johanna, there is still
5 minutes.
minute for me time.
5 minutes left. 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Oh, 5 minutes left. Okay.
Okay.
I will stop. I want to share a video, please. Wait. I must share the sound and then. Okay. This is the video about the PCNL. This one.
Your doctor has recommended that you undergo a stone removal procedure
Suaranya terdengar tidak?
called percutaneous nephrolithotomy, or simply PCNL. The goal of this procedure is to remove all your kidney stones and, when present, ureteral stones. This animation shows the removal of stones in the kidney. PCNL is carried out under general anesthesia. When you are fully sedated, a catheter, which is a hollow tube, is placed in the bladder. The bladder catheter drains the bladder and remains in place with the use of an inflated balloon. Another catheter is placed up into the ureter. Through this catheter, a contrast, dye, may be instilled to allow a better view and exact stone location, and to facilitate access to the kidney, while your urinary tract is visualized using X-rays or ultrasound. Once the stone is located, access to the collecting system of your kidney is gained using a thin needle. This access route is carefully dilated. The guide wire allows the nephroscope to safely access the kidney. Some stones can be removed directly using a grasper. Larger stones need to be fragmented first, using a device like a laser before extraction. After removal of all the stones, your surgeon will perform a contrast study. When there is good passage of contrast material to the bladder, this means that the ureter is also stone-free. In some patients, a temporary small tube, called a double J stent, may be placed to ensure that swelling does not block the drainage of the urine. The stent remains in place by J-shaped curls in both the kidney and bladder. At the end of the procedure, a nephrostomy may be placed. This catheter helps to drain your urine. The catheters and stent are usually removed shortly after the procedure. You can leave the hospital once you are able to empty your bladder sufficiently and you have no fever or pain.
Okay. For the conclusion, urolithiasis is already widespread and is growing in prevalence. A wide range of options are available for surgical treatment. Okay, I think that's all from me, Miss Johanna. Before I end this session, may I have one pantun? Pantun.
Okay,
Yeah,
please.
Miss Johanna?
Okay,
Okay.
please, Miss Janica.
But in Indonesia ya, Indonesia ya. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I will stop share. Okay. Dehidrasi faktor resiko batu ginjal.
Cakep.
Cakep.
Yang hebat itu terlambat ya diulang. Dehidrasi faktor resiko batu ginjal.
Cakep.
Nyeri pinggang hebat itu namanya kolik renal. Okay.
Cakep.
Yuk minum 2-3 liter dengan maksimal. Say goodbye to colic renal. Okay, thank you. That's all from me ya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Ms. Juanita, for giving such informative and comprehensive presentation for the second part. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are going to now to watch a video company profile from Berkala Widya Husada Nursing Academy for the operator, Mas Fadri. Can you share the video of the company profile of Berkala Widya Husada?
Selamat datang di Akademi Keperawatan Berkala Widya Husada. Perkenalkan, saya Yudi Hertanto selaku Ketua Yayasan Berkala Widya Husada yang saat ini telah bersinergi dengan Rumah Sakit Melia Cibubur. Kami memfasilitasi berbagai program keperawatan yang cukup bagi mahasiswa untuk masuk ke dunia kerja profesional. Kami juga memberikan pengalaman praktis bagi para mahasiswa agar sesuai dengan kebutuhan industri kesehatan. Kami terus memperbaiki kurikulum pendidikan kami agar sesuai dengan standar industri kesehatan yang terpercaya. Kami selalu menjalin komunikasi dan koordinasi dengan Rumah Sakit Melia Cibubur untuk memperbaiki kualitas pengajaran kami.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fadri, for the video. And we will continue to the third part of the last presentation for today. To Miss Devi Susanti, are you ready now?
Yes.
Miss Devi Susanti will have a presentation about the emergency nursing cardiac arrest in elderly patients. You have 25 minutes for presentation. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Johanna. Do you hear my voice, Miss Johanna? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Miss Johanna? Oke.
Yeah.
Oke, baik. Hello everyone. Saya mau sapa-sapa dulu nih. ya, peserta Zoom yang sudah hadir dari Malaysia, luar biasa, kemudian dari Pasar Rebo, kemudian juga dari Akper Berkala Widya Usada tentunya begitu ya. Kalau biar semangat tadi Bu Yuan sudah kasih pantun, ya kalau saya mungkin hal yang sederhana saja ya, simpel-simpel saja biar kita semangat nih hari ya. Kalau saya bilang halo, you can say hi. If I ask hi, you can say hello. Oke? Oke, mana nih Pasar Rebo, kemudian Berkala Widya Husada and Malaysia student can answer my question ya. Say hi. Hi.
Halo.
Hi, hi, hi.
Halo.
Hi, hello.
Halo, halo, hai.
Okay. Maybe Miss Nur Samatul Aida can answer. Please unmute. If I say hi, you can say hello. And if I say hello, you can say hi. Okay? Hi, hello.
Hello, hi.
Okay, good. Thank you, Miss. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Gumilang. Good morning, Mrs. Noshamatul Aida, right? And good morning, Mrs. Yuanita Panma. And good morning to all of you in here. Thanks for the opportunity given to me. My name is Devi, and I was able to attend International Lecture Series as one of the speakers. I'm the last speaker in the station, right? I hope everyone in here still focused on my presentation. Okay, I will share my presentation today. Okay. Wait a minute. Okay. Can you see my slide? Maybe still loading in here. Okay. Can you see my slide? Mrs. Johanna?
Yes.
And everybody
Yes, please,
here?
Devi.
Okay. Okay. In accordance with the vision of the Berkala Widya Husada Nursing Academy, I will talk about emergency nursing, cardiac arrest in elderly patient. Who here doesn't have elderly people? I'm sure everyone here has elderly families, right? Because I have only 25 minutes, I will immediately start my presentation. What I will convey are the definition, the etiology, pathophysiology, sign and symptom, the management of the treatment of the cardiac arrest, and the conclusion. Okay, let's start with this picture. Maybe I want to ask my students in here at Berkala Widya Husada, Adevia, can you hear my voice? Adevia?
Yeah.
Are you still in here?
Ya, Ibu.
Okay, I want to ask you. Please answer my question, okay? What the picture is this and what should we do first when we meet a patient like this?
Okay. Hello, wait. Mrs. Johanna, is my voice clear?
Yes, of course, dear.
Okay, thank you. Hello everyone. Hello Mrs. Yuanita Panma, Mrs. Nur Syamatul Aidah binti Osran, Mrs. Devi Susanti, Mr. Indra Gumilang, and Mrs. Yohana Wirati Kusuma. My name is Adevia Anggraini, usually called Via. I am second grade student from Berkala Widya Husada Nursing Academy Jakarta. Here I'm answer some question from Mrs. Devi Susanti, MCUP SP CUP MB. I will answer some question about what should we do first when we find unconscious elderly and what are the steps in providing basic life support. Okay.
Yes.
In the situation in the picture, what we do is ensure the safety of ourselves. The patient and the environment then check the patient respond with AV pool, alert, verbal, pain, and unresponsive. Okay. And in providing basic life support or BHD, the steps are 1. Danger,
2. Response. 3. Call for help. 4. Circulation. 5. Airway. And 6. Breathing. Okay, that's I can give the answer, and thank you.
Okay, good job.
Miss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer, Adivia. Okay,
thank you.
so the answer is right. Yes. When we have to do is check the patient response using the alert, verbal, pain, unresponsive method. Yeah. A for alert by patting or stroke the patient's shoulder. V for verbal by calling the patient name. P for pain by providing painful stimulus. And if the patient does not respond, then the patient is unconsciousness, right? After that, we call for help and then we check carotid pulses as 10 seconds. If there's no pulse, so we can say this condition is cardiac arrest. Or in Malaysia language is correction if I'm wrong, Miss. Mati mengejut, is it right? No.
We don't call it mati mengejut.
Oh no.
What we call it?
I hear in the YouTube like mati mengejut, no ya? What the ini panggilannya apa, Miss?
How to say? Usually we call it cardiac arrest, but in Malay, what we call it?
Still cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
Okay, baik. I think mati mengejut. Atau bilangnya kalau di Indonesia kan mati dadakan ya, seperti tahu bulat digoreng dadakan, Miss. In Indonesia say like that. Okay, what's the definition about the cardiac arrest? Yeah, the cardiac arrest is the cessation of cardiac mechanical activity resulting in the absence of circulating blood flow. In the primary survey, consists of airway, breathing, circulation. The cardiac arrest is circulation emergency, right? The cardiac arrest stops blood from flowing to vital organs. We have the vital organs, 3 vital organs in our body. The first is cerebral or brain, and then our lungs and our heart, right? And it's depriving them of oxygen, and if left untreated, result in death. And you know, there is 2 type death. We call biological death and clinical death. The clinical death still reversible condition, although occurs no pulse, no breath, and unconsciousness. And this is different condition from clinical death. The biological death is reversible condition. There is also occurs no pulse, no breath, and unconsciousness, and also stiffness, cyanosis, and maximally dilated pupils. Sudden cardiac arrest is the unexpected cessation of circulation within a short period of symptom onset. And cardiac arrests are more frequently seen in people with advanced age. A study in Japan reported that patients aged 65 years and older accounted for more than 80% of all patients with out-hospital cardiac arrest. In view of the rapid worldwide expansion of this older section of the population, a higher rate of cardiac arrest can be expected. When the condition occurs in hospital setting, it is referred to as an in-hospital cardiac arrest, or IHCA. An out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, or OHCA, takes place in the pre-hospital environment. And how about the etiology of cardiac arrest? There is 2 types or 2 categories. I divided. There is cardiac arrest, circulatory shock due to non-cardiac disorder, ventilatory failure, and metabolic disturbance. That as we heard previously, the topic of the multiple trauma and renal colic. Both of these diseases are causes cardiac arrest too. Okay, and the other category, American Heart Association guideline, divided into H type and T type. Okay, H type is hypoxia, hypovolemia, acidosis, hyperkalemia or hypokalemia, and hypothermia. And the T types is the tablet or toxin ingestion, cardiac tamponade, tension pneumothorax, and thrombosis because of the pulmonary thrombosis or the coronary thrombosis can make cardiac arrest. Okay, and how about the pathophysiology? The 2 point of the pathophysiology in cardiac arrest is direct cellular damage. It occurs direct cellular damage and edema formation. Okay, let's start with the edema is in the brain. Yeah, edema is particularly harmful in the brain, which has minimal room to expand and often result in increased intracranial pressure and corresponding decreased cerebral perfusion post-resuscitation. And it can make cerebral dysfunction manifested by altered awareness, from mild confusion to coma, seizure, or both. Okay, and then the other side can happen is a decreased adenosine triphosphate or ATP production can make loss of membrane integrity with efflux of potassium and influx of sodium and calcium, and it makes excess intracellular sodium, and it makes a cellular edema. And how about the sign and symptom with the cardiac arrest? In critically or terminal illness, there is one is a shallow breathing can happen, and the second one is arterial hypotension, and the third is progressive decrease in mental alertness. And if cardiac arrest occurs in suddenly, yeah, there is 3 manifestation can happen or can occur are brief myoclonic jerks. Second is other seizure-like activity, and the third is apnea, pulselessness, and unconsciousness. So, what should we do as a nurse when a patient get cardiac arrest? The treatment of cardiac arrest is number 1, high quality CPR. Okay, high quality CPR. This high quality CPR CPR can do when elderly patient get clinical death. Okay, we must check carotid pulses until 10 seconds and check the ECG monitor. If there's no pulse and the ECG monitor show asystole, ventricle fibrillation, ventricle tachycardia, and PEA, we can do the high quality CPR, right? The CPR is carried out by placing the helping hand on half of the patient's sternum with a ratio of 1 compression and ventilation cycle of 30:2. Carry out for 5 cycles within 2 minutes with a compression depth of 5 cm and a speed of 1000 until 1020 times per minute. And the second one is rapid defibrillation for shockable rhythm. When after we do CPR 5 cycles, we must evaluate the pulse. If there is no pulse and still the rhythm is ventricular fibrillation or ventricular tachycardia, we can continue with the defibrillation. The defibrillation, we can use 200 joules until or 360 joules, right? And then we can goes to early administration of epinephrine for non-shockable rhythms, and when possible, treatment of primary cause. And then if the patient can survive, that the manifestation is there is pulse and patient can breathe and conscious again, and the ECG monitor will be sinus rhythm. It calls patient in condition of ROS. Yeah, ROS. Nah, Kak Rose in Ipin Upin movie, right? Rose in here is ROSC, yeah, ROSE, C. R is return, O for off, S for spontaneous, C for circulation. That means Rose is return of spontaneous circulation. So if the patient in condition Rose after CPR and defibrillator, we do the post-resuscitative care after CPR, okay? And this is the American Heart Association change
Miss
of
Devi,
survival for adult.
if
Yeah.
you
Hello.
still have 15 minutes left.
Okay.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Yeah. You can see this in AHA or American Heart Association change of survival for adult in hospital cardiac arrest and out hospital cardiac arrest. This change can be adult is same like elderly patient. Okay, we can use this change of survival. Okay, and then this is the algorithm for the adult or elderly patient. Sorry, it's a blur. Maybe you can read American Heart Association guideline 2020. You can see and read this. Okay, in elderly patient, a natural death may be preferable to enduring CPR. Why? CPR can be harmful, not just for patient, but also for medical provider. Are you agree with me, Miss, or the other students?
I agree, Mrs. Devi.
Okay. Because for the elderly patient, we must think about the complication of CPR. Okay, we must think about the complication of the CPR. If during CPR the compression pressure applied exceeds 5 centimeter, it can cause refractors and cause pulmonary bleeding, right? In elderly patient, there is a decrease in muscle, bone, and fat mass, so that the compression depth will be affected. And if during CPR, the helping hand is not directly on the sternum, it makes liver laceration. So, yeah, for this complication, for the elderly, it's so dangerous, right? And then not only for the patient, for health workers too. For health workers, as a nurse, as a doctor, the act of CPR on elderly patient create a dilemma in their feeling. Yeah, in their feeling. In 2021, a study found that 60% of providers experience moral distress from futile resuscitation, and that these experiences were associated with burnout. Another study linked intrusive memories and emotional exhaustion to difficult resuscitation. They are feeling like I felt like I was doing harm to him. I felt like he deserved a more dignified death. And it's no wonder that many doctors are not found on CPR and choose not to receive it themselves. So, and then not only the complication, but the survival rate after CPR in elderly population, we must think about it. The hospital survival rate following in-hospital cardiac arrest and out-hospital cardiac arrest in the older population improved in the recent decade to do not exceed 28.5% and 11.1% respectively. The survival until hospital discharge range between 11.6 and 28.5% for in-hospital cardiac arrest and 0 until 11.1% for out-hospital cardiac arrest, and decline with increasing age. And a good neurological outcome defined as the cerebral performance category or CPC 1 until 2 was found in 11.5 and 23.6% in hospital cardiac arrest and up to 10.5% in out-hospital cardiac arrest of all patients. However, the proportion of CVC 1 until 2 among patients surviving until hospital discharge was 82 until 93% in hospital cardiac arrest and 77 until 91.6% out hospital cardiac arrest. So we can see on my slide, based on the age of the elderly patient, patient in their 70 years old, survival after out of hospital CPR, there's only 6.7%. And over 90 years old, there's only 2.4%. And the elderly patient who have cancer or heart, lung, or liver disease, just only less than 2% survival after out of hospital CPR. So the complication like that, the survival rate like that, the risk factor who can make worse survival rate were increasing age, a previous history of heart failure or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, malignancy, renal dysfunction, multiple organ failure, or septicemia after CPR. That CPR can we can choose this option, right?
Miss Devi?
What's the color of this?
Miss Devi, sorry,
yes?
you have 5 minutes left. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, guys, let's see the picture of this. What's the color of this identity bracelet? You know? What's the color? Hello, everyone. What's the color?
Hello, Miss Devi. The purple.
Purple.
The purple, right. The purple is the favorite color of my friends, Mrs. Restu Iriani. So if you see this one, you remind Mrs. Restu Iriani. Hello, Mrs. Restu Iriani, hello. Can you hear me? Are you there? It's a joke, right? It's a joke, yeah. If the you see the purple one, the purple identity bracelet, you must remind this is the DNR. Okay, do not resuscitation. Okay, do not resuscitation. CPR can indeed save patient from death, but looking at the risk factor and complication that can occur after CPR, maybe we as a nurse can give the family an option, namely DNR. Yeah, DNR. Okay, the conclusion of this session is the hospital survival rate following in hospital cardiac arrest and out hospital cardiac arrest in the older population improved in the recent decade to do not exceed 28.5% and 11.1% respectively. Several risk factors were identified, among which increasing age and nursing home residency. However, the effect of age on outcome remains controversial, and it should not be used as the sole decision criterion whether to initiate CPR. This is my CV and this is my references. And that's my explanation. I hope it's useful, and I will return the time to the moderator again. Thank you very much. Terima kasih. Kamsahamnida.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Devi, for the presentation and for giving such an informative and comprehensive presentation for the third part. Okay, that was a very comprehensive presentation, ladies and gentlemen. After we know about the emergency management in adults and elderly, now it's time to have discussion to our speakers, of course. And you can, for the audience, you can give the question to our amazing speaker today. Please, you can raise your hand at Zoom, or maybe you can put your answer in the field chat. Okay. Is there any audience who wants to ask first? Please. The audience? Or maybe with the speaker. Miss Devi wants to ask Miss Wanita, or Miss Wanita ask to Puan Samatu. Please, is there any
Sepertinya sudah paham semua,
questions?
Miss Johanna. Already understand
Thank God for them.
It's too clear.
It's already clear now,
Maybe.
okay? Okay,
Alhamdulillah.
Miss, I think Miss Siti.
Oh, bukan.
Sorry for the inconvenience sound. Okay, I see the raise hand from Siti Rukaya.
Oh. Committee.
I almost said Siti Nurhaliza.
Oh, Siti Nurhaliza. Wow.
Okay. Sorry. Miss Siti Rukaya, please, what's your answer and give to the speaker?
Oke. Apakah suara saya jelas terdengar?
Jelas, Ibu.
Jelas.
Clear ya? Oke. I want to give one question to all speaker. Maybe just one question, but maksudnya ditujukannya untuk semua pembicara. My question is, what we should do in the pre-hospital phase, like in the home, if we find the patient with colic renal pain, cardiac arrest, especially old people, and then head injury resulting from a fall. Maybe that is my question. Thank you very much.
Okay, to the speaker, have you already hear the question? Who wants to go first? Answer the question from Miss Siti Rukaya. Is there Miss Yuanita? Are you ready?
Okay, thank you, Miss Johanna. Can I answer with Indonesian language?
Okay, please.
I will answer in English, but campur-campur.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay. In the pre-hospital, in the renal colic is a characteristic by severe pain. So in the pre-hospital, maybe the patient can get the family can give the pain relief to the patient to avoid the colic more severe. Just that for the renal colic, and also if there is a nausea or vomiting, we can give the antiemetic like ondansetron. I think we have it in our house and in our home. Just that. Okay. The analgesic could be NSAID like ibuprofen or maybe mefenamic acid.
Yeah.
That's all, Miss Johanna. Miss
Okay,
Ukay,
thank you.
Mrs. Ukay.
Miss Siti, are you clear enough from the?
Okay, enough.
Okay, then the
Okay.
next maybe.
I will answer. Maybe I will share first my slide.
Okay.
For clearly answer about your question. In this slide, American Heart Association. Based on American Heart Association change survival, we can use this one, the step. Okay. If we meet the patient at home, at school, or the others settings, right, in out hospital cardiac arrest, we must do check the carotid pulse, the patient, until 10 seconds, if not, and check the response patient, like alert for bowel pain. So if there is no there is no pulse and there is no response from the patient, we get calling the 911, see the ambulance, emergency ambulance in hospital. So after that, we get the high quality. We do the high quality CPR, just only compression first. Just only compression first, and then if we have the AED, you know, AED is automated external defibrillator. We can use that before we waiting the ambulance comes. If the ambulance comes, the patient get to hospital and post cardiac arrest can take off there, and the patient will be recovery. Maybe that's it. My answer. Is it clear?
Okay, thank you, Miss Devi.
Okay, the
Okay,
next
thank you.
answer from Puan Nur.
Okay. So in Malaysia, actually, we do have the the BLS, basic life support guideline, which is developed by MCORD, but basically it based on AHA too. All right, in the case where there is a cut out of cardiac arrest, okay, so in case if there more than one person, more than one rescuer there, so we can actually ask the another rescuer, the another person to call activate 999, meaning that they call the call center and then inform what happened to the patient to the call center, and then call center will send the assistant, meaning that they will send the ambulance, and another person, because we're talking about two or more rescuer, another person can conduct the BLS to the patient. Okay, in the case where there is only one rescuer there, okay, so because right now we have phone, we where we can actually call the activate the MERS 999, meaning we call the center. At the same time, we loud the speaker, and then we do the compression to the patient. The one for the out hospital cardiac arrest. Okay, depending on the situation, whether they are more than one rescuer or alone. I mean, only the rescuer and the victim.
Okay, Miss Siti, are you clear enough for the answer from Puan Nur?
Okay, thank you. It's clear.
Maybe I want to ask to Puan Nur, is it free or the patient must pay for something for the ambulance maybe?
Sorry, what again?
In Malaysia, if we call the ambulance, we must pay for the ambulance or it's free for the patient?
Okay, if emergency cases like that is we don't because it public hospital usually we charge only RM1. So that one is after the patient discharged from the hospital, and then they will provide the bill. But in terms of if we call the MERS 99, they send the ambulance, there is no charge on that.
Okay, thank you for your information. And the other audience maybe wants to ask to our amazing speakers for today. Okay, please. Okay, I see Miss Sri Nurima.
Sri Numira.
Numira, I'm sorry. Miss Sri.
Halo, Miss Numira. Nice to
Hi,
meet
Miss
you.
Devi.
Okay.
Hi.
I miss you too.
Hi.
Okay, please, Miss Sri,
Thank
with
you.
your question.
My name is Numira from East Perbasarbo. My question for Miss Yuanita. My kidney stone more common in men than women. Why? kidney stone more common in men than women? Thank you, Miss Juanita.
Okay, the question to Miss Juanita. Miss Juanita, please answer the 3 questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Miss Johanna and Miss Numera. One of the risk factor of the renal stone is gender. The stone is frequent in male than women because of the first that a man tend to have a greater intake of high protein, high salt, and it makes kidney stone more likely to more likely kidney stones like that. And the second is because the dehydration. Men tend to drink less water than the recommended daily intake in some research. Okay, and then the third, it's about the man has testosterone, that the testosterone can increase oxalate production, that making them susceptible to calcium oxalate stones. And then in the women have higher urine citrate level, which can inhibit calcium oxalate formation. Or in Indonesia, pada laki-laki itu ada testosteron yang dapat meningkatkan produksi oksalat yang akan menjadi bahan pembentuk dari batu kalsium oksalat. Sedangkan pada perempuan itu dia memiliki tinggi sitrat ya, sehingga itu bisa menghalangi terbentuknya batu kalsium oksalat. Like that. Miss Johanna.
Okay, thank you, Miss Jonita. Yeah, is it the speaker, Miss Jonita, is answer all your question, Miss Sri? Okay, thank you. Is there anyone who wants to ask to our speaker today? If it's not, I want to ask again. May I? Okay. Okay, I want to ask to Wan Nur. What if the elderly didn't want to get to the hospital when the trauma is accident to the elderly, and she didn't want to go to the hospital?
Okay.
What should we do?
Okay, so the elderly, so I rephrase the question. I afraid that I might take the question wrongly. So if the accident happened to the elderly and elderly refuse to go to hospital, what we should do? Am I right?
Yeah, like that.
So, okay, in that case, actually, we do have the ethical consideration where if the benefit, the weight of the benefit is more than the disadvantage. For example, if we as a healthcare provider able to able to decide for the patient, although the patient have the authority to decide, but then we as a healthcare provider, if we have if the injury is safe, meaning that give benefit if we give treatment to the patient, so we can bring patient to the hospital and override their authority to make decision.
Okay, thank you, Miss Nor.
And then some more, I think if the patient refuse to go to the hospital, we have to check the patient condition first, because sometimes probably patient confused. We don't know the situation at that time. Probably because of the trauma itself, the patient confused. They cannot decide properly. So we cannot simply follow their decision blindly. So I believe the best thing is we bring the patient to the hospital first, because we don't know what exactly happened to the patient during that trauma itself.
Okay, Miss. And is it okay for the elderly if we want to stay at home, but have appropriate treatment? Is it okay for the elderly at home?
Is it okay for the patient to be at home? You mean after injury or after what? Because I think
after the injury.
After the injury, okay. If again, I think we as a healthcare provider, we have to decide the disadvantage versus advantage going to the hospital. And some more elderly, they might suffer how to say, dementia, Alzheimer, meaning that we cannot rely on their decision alone. Okay, if there is no relative there, because probably they are not mentally stable during at that time. Sometimes they're anxious because they're afraid because of the injury itself. They're anxious and they cannot provide the proper decision. So we as a healthcare provider, we actually one of the advocator, patient advocator. So we have to decide on the patient right. So many things happen during, many things can happen to the patient during the trauma itself. So by judging through the patient decision alone, I think it's not fair for them.
Okay, thank you, Miss. Okay, for the audience, if there anyone to ask again to our amazing speaker today, is it?
There is a question in the chat group, chat room.
From Dave Dafelau. When we find someone who is unconscious, no pulse, no breathing, we can continue to give CPR if we don't know how long he has been unconscious. The question wants to give to who?
Me. It's about the cardiac arrest.
Okay, Miss Devi.
Okay, I will answer.
Okay,
I will
please,
answer the
Miss Devi.
question. It's a good question for me, and I will try to answer the question. When we must stop the CPR, is it the question? Yeah. We must stop the CPR. Yes, we must think about the biological death. If when I speak after before this, yeah, there is the clinical manifestation. We must know about the biological death. There is a cures, no pulse, no breathing, and unconsciousness, but also stiffness, cyanotic, and maximally dilated pupils. So if there's manifestation occurs, we must stop the CPR, not continue again, okay? Because the patient get the biological death. But if doesn't occurs, it still can reversible situation because of the clinical death. So we can continue the CPR until 30 minutes, just only until 30 minutes. After that, we check the pulse and we check the breath, and the other manifestation can get the biological death, like pupil dilated pupils, maxillary. Yeah. So we must check of this. Maybe that's it. My answer. Is it clear?
Devflow, how about the answer from Miss Devi? Okay. From the chat, we have information about the serangan jantung in Malaysia.
Oh, serangan
Or
jantung.
cardiac
Oke.
arrest, that its meaning is used to. Yeah, okay.
Mati mendadak ya.
No. Thank you for Zahra
Mati mendadak.
for
Ya.
information. Serangan jantung yang menyebabkan jantung berhenti secara tiba-tiba. Sudden cardiac arrest, SCR. Okay, another questions? I think no.
I think
From
for,
Mohat, we have information. Yeah.
I think for the sudden cardiac arrest either can be accepted mati mengejut or jantung berhenti mengejut. Mengejut.
Mati mengejut ya.
Jantung berhenti mengejut or mati mengejut.
Hai.
We accept it.
Okay, thank you for all the audience and the amazing speaker for today. Ladies and gentlemen, we have finally come to the end of this part of this international lecture series study based of academic and best practice, emergency management in adults and elderly. Before we close the session, I would like to call Miss Revi, the director and the lecturer of Berkala Widya Husada Nursing Academy, Jakarta, Indonesia, to give a certificate for the moderator and the first amazing speaker, Puan Nur. Miss Revi is here.
Oke, terima kasih.
Halo Miss Revi.
Halo. Clear ya suara saya, Bu Yo?
Okay, it's clear now.
Oke. Assalamualaikum, Puan Nur Samatul, Aida from Malaysia. Salam kenal, Puan,
salam kenal, Puan.
dari saya dengan Bu Revi. Ya, I'm really appreciate and happiness for today in International Lecture Series.
Yes.
Thank you for Puan Nur Samatul Aida for your sharing and join to this activity. So I'm happy, so I'm kejut-kejut ya. Kalau mendengar Puan Nur Samatul, waduh, sungguh hebat advertise sekali nih ya dalam trauma and fall-nya.
Sikit-sikit juga.
Ya, sikit-sikit.
I'm still masih juga belajar. Banyak lagi update.
Okay, good. Tapi, okay. And now I will give you international certificate for appreciation in international lecture series event. And I hope this today activity can provide better knowledge for all of us. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Puan Nur Samatul
Thank you
Aida.
atas jemputan.
And second,
Thank you atas jemputan.
okay, thank you. Sama-sama. And second certificate for appreciation, I will give for Miss Johanna. Thank you for leading this activity well. Okay, and always sukses for you. Ya. Kemudian terima kasih juga dalam kesempatan ini kepada Bapak Gumilang dari ALTC yang sudah memfasilitasi kami. Bapak, terima kasih. Mudah-mudahan nanti ini bisa berlanjut pada series berikutnya. Oke, thank you.
Thank you.
Just
Okay,
it,
thank you,
Miss
Miss
Johanna.
Revi. Okay, thank you, Miss Revi, for the certificate for us. And we go to the Prof. Indah to give the certificate to Miss Yuanita and Miss Devi. So, Prof. Indah, the time is yours.
Baik, terima kasih Puan Yohana, terima kasih banyak Ibu Revi, Direktur Berkala. Saya sebelum kasih sertifikat, saya akan ucapkan selamat join kepada Profesor Zahra dari MASA. Selamat join, Prof. Mohon maaf, mungkin Prof. Zahra tadi kelihatan hadir di acara Zoom ini, dan beliau sendiri yang bertanya tadi masalah yang jantung itu ya. sekali lagi terima kasih buat Prof. Jara udah bisa hadir di dalam acara sharing session di Zoom hari ini. Baik, selanjutnya saya
terima kasih.
silakan Prof. Kalau ada 1-2
Ya,
menit
terima kasih.
untuk silakan.
Ya, saya ucapkan tahniah kepada penyelenggara dan salam kenal bagi yang baru join. Memang bagus info-infonya. Dari masa ke masa kita harus teruskan dengan input-input yang professional knowledge. Alhamdulillah, everyone has done their part and the speakers all awesome. So with that, thank you so much. I won't be able to on my camera because I am another line. I have another class, so I use another class for the camera. So concurrently, I look like I am killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So thank you, especially those panel. Very good info. Kita jumpa lagi ya Pak Gumilang dan semua. Terima kasih.
Oke, terima kasih
Thank
Prof.
you, Prof. Zahra. Salam kenal, Prof.
Thank
Baik,
you, Prof.
informasi mungkin nanti dalam waktu dekat kami akan membawa rombongan dari Indonesia ke Mahsa, Prof. Mungkin suratnya secara resmi akan saya kirim, insya Allah ke Mahsa dalam waktu dekat. Mudah-mudahan bisa lancar. Baik, untuk
Insya Allah.
Insya Allah.
Boleh.
Terima kasih, Prof.
Sekarang kita ada dari Yunisa. Saya ada Yunisa, ada 6 orang datang. Minggu lepas dari Madagaskar, daripada Sulawesi. Tiap-tiap minggu saya ada delegasi. Ya, bagus. So beritahu lebih awal lah jika nak datang.
Baik. Baik, Prof. Nanti akan saya kirimkan suratnya untuk kunjungan kami ke Mahsa. Insya Allah kita bisa jumpa sama Prof. Jara, sama Puan Nursa Matul dan teman-teman lain di Mahsa. Terima kasih sekali lagi buat Prof. Jara. Baik, untuk selanjutnya saya akan berikan sertifikat virtual kepada pembicara. Terima kasih, sangat bagus sekali tadi paparannya. Yang pertama buat Puan Yuanita Anma dari Pasarbo. Ini mungkin kelihatannya agak buram nih, Bu. Belum. Nah, ini buat Puan Yuanita, selamat dan terima kasih banyak atas paparannya yang sangat luar biasa buat kami yang bukan orang nursing tapi jadi tertarik dengan materi dari Puan Yuanita. Kemudian yang kedua, apresiasi buat
Thank you, Prof.
Iya, sama-sama. Pembicara yang kedua dari Berkala. Sertifikatnya mana? Maaf. Buat Puan Devi Susanti. Ya, terima kasih Puan Devi Susanti sudah ikut memaparkan materi dalam acara sharing session ini. Mudah-mudahan ke depan kita akan berbicara banyak lagi terkait dengan materi atau kasus yang lain. Kami insya Allah akan kami felisitasi untuk teman-teman, dan di samping itu juga kepada teman-teman jangan hanya berhenti di sini, tapi tetap kita kolaborasi untuk berbagai macam kegiatan akademik maupun non akademik. Silakan, kita udah punya saudara di Mahsa, kita gunakan kerjasama ini dengan baik. Itu saja dari saya. Terima kasih sekali lagi buat Puan Devi Susanti.
Thank you, Prof. Gumilang.
Thank you, Prof. Gumilang.
Thank you.
Ya,
Thank you.
silakan Ibu
Okay,
Johanna.
thank you for giving the certificate from Prof. Indah and Ms. Revi. Now we have